Have you ever built something with your own hands? Poured your blood, sweat, and every dream into it, only to wake up one morning and be told, it's not yours anymore. That's exactly what happened to me. The HOA didn't just threaten my property. They tried to erase my very life in just 15 hours. For the last 22 years. My warehouse wasn't just a storage place. It was my home. I had bought the old rusting building when everyone else saw it as junk. To them, it was an eyesore at the edge of the neighborhood. To me, it was a blank canvas. With my late wife, Ellen, I spent years fixing it up. We put in windows where the lights streamed like golden ribbons at dawn. She planted flowers in tin. Buckets outside the steel doors, saying, no place is too rough for beauty. We built a little loft where we'd sip tea in the evenings, watching the sun dip below the horizon. That warehouse wasn't just bricks and metal. It was my memory chest, my fortress of love, and after Ellen passed away, it became the only place that kept me connected to her spirit. But on one seemingly ordinary morning, everything shattered. I was fixing an old radio, hands stained with grease, when I heard a loud bang, bang, bang on the steel door. Mr. Collins. A sharp voice called, "This is HOA business. Open up immediately." I wiped my hands, frowning. I had never cared much about the HOA. They didn't usually bother me, and I sure didn't bother them. When I opened the door, 3 people stood there. Mrs. Latham, the HOA president, in her spotless white blazer, lips pressed thin like she was chewing on lemons. A younger man in a suit holding a clipboard, eyes darting like a crow looking for scraps, and a burly security guard, arms crossed. His presence screaming intimidation. Mrs. Latham didn't waste a second. She shoved a paper into my hands. "This warehouse," she said coldly, "has been reclassified under new community property guidelines. Effective immediately, this structure now belongs to the HOA. You have 15 hours to vacate." I stared at the paper, blinking, thinking it was some sick joke. "What are you talking about?" "This is my home. I bought this place before most of you even moved into this neighborhood." The man with the clipboard cleared his throat. The board voted. "Under the new zoning agreement, your warehouse is now designated for community use. You cannot reside here any longer." I laughed bitterly. "You voted? On my property? That's not how ownership works." But Mrs. Latham's lips curled into a smile that chilled me. "You can hire all the lawyers you want, Mr. Collins, but by the time you do, this building will already be under our control. We've given you a generous timeline, 15 hours. And just like that, they turned and walked away, leaving me clutching a paper that felt heavier than any stone. I sat on Ellen's old rocking chair, staring at the walls we painted together, walls that echoed with laughter long gone. My hands trembled as I dialed my daughter, Rachel, who lived 3 towns over. She picked up on the second ring. "Dad, everything okay?" I couldn't keep the crack out of my voice. They're taking it, Rachel. The HOA. They said this warehouse isn't mine anymore. They gave me 15 hours to leave." "What?" she nearly shouted. "That's impossible. You have the deed." "I do," I whispered, glancing at the metal box where all my documents were kept. "But they don't care. They're acting like I'm squatting on my own land."
Ow.
There was silence on the line, then her voice softer. "Dad, Mom loved that place. You built your life there. They can't just erase that. Please, don't let them scare you." Tears burned my eyes. "I don't know if I can fight them, Rachel. They came with papers, with guards. I feel like a criminal in my own home." "Promise me," she said firmly, "you won't leave without me." "I'll drive down tonight." I wanted to promise, but when I looked around at Ellen's faded photographs, at the old piano she once played, at the shelf where she kept her teacups, my heart broke. Could I really protect all this in just 15 hours? By noon, the whispers had started. Neighbors passed by the warehouse, peeking in like vultures circling prey. One man even smirked and said, "Heard this place is going to be the new HOA rec center. About time they cleaned this junk up." I clenched my fists. "This isn't junk. This is my home." I shouted, but they just walked away, laughing. That's when it hit me. The HOA had poisoned the community against me. To them, I wasn't a homeowner anymore. I was just an obstacle standing in the way of their shiny new project. I tried to pack, but every object screamed Ellen's name, the quilt she stitched during winter, the books she left half-read, still with bookmarks tucked inside, the old radio she loved. Even when it crackled more than it played music, as I held these things, my chest tightened. If I left, it wouldn't just be losing a roof over my head. It would be like losing her all over again. That's when I made a decision. I wasn't leaving. Not without a fight. At exactly 5 p.m. they came back. Mrs. Latham, the lawyer, and the guard. "Well," she asked smugly, "packed yet?" I stood tall, though my knees trembled. "No, this is my home." "You don't get to take it because you voted. I have the deed. I have proof." Her smile faltered, just for a second. But then she leaned in, her voice dripping with venom. "You're an old man, Mr. Collins. Do you really think you can take on the entire board? By tomorrow, this building will have new locks. If you resist, you'll be forcibly removed. And don't think the police will take your side. We already have them briefed." My heart pounded, but I forced myself to look her in the eye. "You can try to erase me, but you'll regret it. I promise you that." For the first time, I saw something flicker in her eyes, doubt. That night, just as my hope was crumbling, Rachel pulled up in her old car. She rushed inside and hugged me so tightly I nearly broke. "Dad," she said fiercely, "we're not giving up. If they think they can scare us, they've picked the wrong family." I wanted to believe her, but fear still gnawed at me. "Rachel, they said they have the police on their side. What if they drag us out?" She pulled back and looked at me with Ellen's same fire in her eyes. "Then let them try. We'll fight with truth. And if there's one thing Mom taught us, it's this. Bullies only win if you let them." I swallowed hard, her words planting a seed of strength in my chest. Maybe, just maybe, we had a chance. As the clock ticked closer to the HOA's deadline, Rachel and I braced ourselves for a battle that could strip us of everything, or prove that love and truth can outlast even the cruelest injustice. The night was heavy with silence, the kind that presses against your chest. Rachel and I sat at the kitchen table. Papers spread out everywhere, my old deed, tax receipts, even utility bills proving the warehouse had always been mine, but the silence was shattered at midnight. When headlights swept across the front of the warehouse and a car, door slammed shut, then came the pounding on the door. "Police. Open up." I froze. My hands gripped the table edge so hard they hurt. Rachel's eyes widened, but then narrowed with determination. "Dad," she whispered, "this is exactly what the HOA wants, to scare us into leaving before morning. Don't let them." With a shaky breath, I opened the door. 2 uniformed officers stood there, their expressions stern. Behind them, I could see Mrs. Latham's white blazer glowing in the dark as she stood smugly by her car. Arms crossed. "Mr. Collins," one officer said, "we've received notice from the HOA that this property is no longer yours, and that you are unlawfully occupying it." Rachel stepped forward, voice sharp. "That's a lie. My father has the deed. We have proof of ownership right here." She waved the papers in her hand. The officer glanced at the documents, hesitating. His partner shifted uneasily. But before they could respond, Mrs. Latham's voice cut through the air like a knife. "Don't be fooled, officers. That deed is outdated. The board voted for reclassification. He's trespassing on community property," Rachel snapped. "You can't vote away private ownership. That's not how the law works." The younger officer finally spoke. "Ma'am, with all due respect, this sounds like a civil matter. It's not for us to enforce without a court order." For the first time that night, I felt a flicker of relief. But Mrs. Latham's smug smile didn't falter. "Oh, don't worry," she said smoothly. "The court papers are already in motion. And when they're filed, Mr. Collins will be out on the street." She turned and walked away, heels clicking like a metronome of doom. Rachel slammed the door shut, her hands trembling. "Dad," she whispered, "they're not just bluffing. They've planned this. We need to find out what's really going on. The next morning, Rachel sat glued to her laptop at the kitchen table. I watched her eyes dart across the screen, her fingers flying over the keys. "Here it is," she muttered. "The HOA passed a new bylaw 3 months ago. It reclassified certain properties near the community center as potential common use. But look at this." She spun the screen toward me. I squinted at the text. Hidden deep in the fine print was a clause that said, "Properties not registered with the county as residential at the time of bylaw passage may be subject to conversion." Rachel jabbed her finger at the line. "Dad, your warehouse is technically listed as commercial on old records, even though you've lived here for decades. They're exploiting that loophole." My stomach twisted. So they knew. All along. They targeted me, she said grimly. But here's the real kicker. I found HOA meeting minutes from last month. They already signed a contract with a developer. They plan to turn this warehouse into a luxury clubhouse and sell memberships for profit. I felt rage course through me. So it's not about community property. It's about money. Rachel nodded. They're stealing your home for a business venture, and they're using that loophole to get away with it. Later that day, as I stood outside, trying to catch my breath from all the revelations, a voice called softly, "Mr. Collins?" I turned to see Mrs. Peterson, a widow from 3 houses down. She looked nervous, glancing over her shoulder before stepping closer. I shouldn't even be here," she whispered. "But I overheard them at the last HOA meeting. They bragged about how much money they'd make once your warehouse is converted. They don't care about the community. They care about lining their pockets." My throat tightened. "Why are you telling me this?" Her eyes shimmered with tears. "Because I know what it feels like to lose your home. They tried to find me into foreclosure last year. If not for my son stepping in, I'd have been homeless. Please, don't give up. You have more support than you think." She pressed a folded note into my hand. "Names of neighbors who disagree with the board? They're too scared to speak, but maybe if you fight, they'll find courage too." For the first time in days, hope flickered inside me. That evening, the HOA returned, this time with a moving truck idling at the curb. Mrs. Latham strode forward, a stack of papers in her hands. "Mr. Collins," she announced loudly so all the neighbors could hear, "your time is up. This property is officially seized for community use. Vacate immediately, or you will be removed." Rachel stormed out beside me, voice shaking with fury. "You can't just take someone's house because you feel like it. We know about the developer contract. This isn't about the community, it's about your greed." Gasps rippled through the small crowd of neighbors who had gathered to watch. Some shifted uncomfortably, whispering to one another. Mrs. Latham's face turned red, but she forced a smile. "Don't listen to these lies. The Collins family is trying to hold the community hostage." I stepped forward, raising my voice so everyone could hear. 22 years ago, my wife and I built our lives here. This warehouse isn't just steel and bricks. It's memories. It's love. It's home. If they can take it from me, what's stopping them from taking your homes next? The crowd stirred. A few people nodded. Mrs. Peterson raised her voice. "He's right. They've been abusing their power for years." For the first time, Mrs. Latham's confident mask cracked. That night, Rachel dug deeper, her face lit with determination as she uncovered more files. "Dad," she whispered, "you won't believe this. One of the board members, Mr. Harris, has a financial stake in the developer's company. He's literally voting to steal your home so he can profit personally."
Oh, my fists clenched.
That's corruption. That's fraud. Rachel's eyes burned with fire. We can expose them, but we need evidence strong enough to survive court. If we can prove conflict of interest, their whole case falls apart. We stayed up until dawn, gathering everything we could, meeting minutes, emails Mrs. Peterson had secretly shared, even photographs of the board's private gatherings with the developer. I was exhausted, but for the first time, I felt like we weren't powerless. At sunrise, the sound of engines rumbled outside again. This time, 3 police cars pulled up. Officers fanned out and neighbors spilled onto the street. Mrs. Latham marched forward, papers in hand. "Here is the court order," she declared triumphantly. "Remove this man immediately." My heart dropped, but Rachel stepped forward, her voice ringing like a bell. "Wait, that order was obtained through fraud. We have evidence that members of this HOA board are financially benefiting from stealing my father's property. That's a conflict of interest and abuse of power. If you enforce this order, you'll be aiding a criminal scheme." The lead officer hesitated, scanning the crowd. The cameras of neighbors' phones pointed at him. "Ma'am, is this true?" he asked Mrs. Latham. She sputtered. "Of course not. These are baseless accusations." But Rachel pulled out printed emails and contracts, handing them over. The officer skimmed them, his brows furrowing deeper with every line. Finally, he handed the papers back. "We can't enforce this right now. Not until a judge reviews these new claims." Gasps erupted from the crowd. Mrs. Latham's face went pale. "This isn't over," she hissed, retreating toward her car. But I could see it, the first crack in her empire of control. That evening, neighbors began knocking on my door. People I barely knew, people who had once laughed at me, now came with words of support. "We didn't know. Mr. Collins, they lied to us too. If you fight them in court, you won't be alone." All right. Smiled through tears. "See, Dad, Mom was right. Bullies only win if you let them. And now, they're losing." I held her hand, my voice breaking. "I almost gave up. But you gave me the strength to fight." As I looked around at the warehouse glowing in the sunset, I knew this was no longer just about saving my home. It was about saving the community from people who thought they could own us all. The HOA had drawn first blood, but now the truth was out. The battle wasn't over, it was only beginning. And as court loomed, one final twist would decide everything, whether love, truth, and justice could truly overcome greed. The morning of the court hearing felt like a storm brewing inside me. For days, Rachel and I had worked tirelessly gathering documents, testimonies, and even video clips from neighbors who had finally spoken out. But still, doubt gnawed at me as I put on my old suit. The one I hadn't worn since Ellen's funeral. I caught my reflection in the cracked mirror. My hair had thinned, my face lined with years of struggle, but my eyes, they carried something new. Not just grief, not just fear, determination. Rachel walked in, holding a thick folder. "Dad," she whispered, "we have everything we need. You're not alone." I squeezed her hand. "For Ellen," I said softly. "For us." The courthouse buzzed with whispers as neighbors, reporters, and curious onlookers filled the benches. The HOA had made this fight so public that now everyone wanted to see how it would end. On the other side of the room sat Mrs. Latham, pristine in her white blazer, her expression icy. Beside her was Mr. Harris, the board member with ties to the developer. They whispered furiously to their lawyer, their confidence faltering under the weight of the eyes watching them. When the judge entered, the room fell silent. Case number 4821. Collins versus Hamilton Oaks Association. Let's proceed. The HOA lawyer strutted to the podium. "Your Honor, this case is simple. The Hamilton Oaks Association acted within its rights under newly adopted bylaws. The property in question is not legally zoned for residential use and therefore is subject to reclassification as community property. Mr. Collins has unlawfully resided in a commercial structure." The lawyer's words were polished, but they sliced into me like knives. He gestured dramatically toward me. "This man is not a victim. He's a violator." I clenched my jaw, gripping Rachel's hand tightly under the table. When it was our turn, Rachel rose. She wasn't a lawyer, but she spoke with a fire that no courtroom training could match. "Your Honor, this isn't about zoning. This is about corruption and greed. My father has lived in that warehouse for 22 years. He's paid taxes, maintained the property, and contributed to this community. The HOA only came after him when they realized they could profit by seizing his home." She handed a packet to the bailiff, who delivered it to the judge. "These are emails and contracts proving that Mr. Harris A sitting board member has a financial stake in the developer contracted to transform the warehouse. That is a direct conflict of interest. Gasps rippled through the courtroom. Mr. Harris shifted uncomfortably, his face pale. Rachel pressed on. This isn't about community benefit. It's about lining their pockets at the expense of an old man who simply wants to live in the home he'd built with his late wife. If that doesn't strike at the heart of justice, then what are we even doing here? Her voice cracked, tears glistening in her eyes. My mom died in that home. Every memory of her lives in those walls. Taking it away isn't just theft, it's cruelty. I could hear sniffles from the audience. Even from people who once sided with the HOA. The judge's expression grew stern as he flipped through the documents. Mr. Harris, is it true you have a financial interest in the developer involved in this case? Mr. Harris stammered, sweat glistening on his forehead. It's just a minor answer the question, the judge barked. Yes, he admitted finally. His voice barely a whisper. The courtroom erupted. Neighbors shouted, reporters scribbled furiously. The judge banged his gavel for order. Silence. He turned back to Mrs. Latham. And you knew of this conflict of interest? She hesitated, her mask of control cracking. I thought it wasn't relevant, the judge's voice thundered. Not relevant? You attempted to use fraudulent authority to seize a man's private property. This is not just unethical, it borders on criminal. The tension was unbearable as the judge leaned forward, his voice steady and firm. This court finds that the Hamilton Oaks Association acted in bad faith and abused its power. The seizure order is hereby nullified. Ownership of the warehouse remains with Mr. Collins. Tears flooded my eyes. Rachel grabbed my hand, sobbing with relief. But the judge wasn't finished. Furthermore, this court orders an investigation into the HOA board for potential fraud and financial misconduct. Officers of the court will review all HOA dealings with the developer in question. The room exploded in murmurs. Mrs. Latham slumped in her chair. Her power shattered. Mr. Harris buried his face in his hands. For the first time in weeks, I felt like I could breathe again. Outside the courthouse, neighbors gathered around me. People who had mocked me now looked at me with shame in their eyes. Mr. Collins, we're sorry. You were right all along. They almost fooled us too. Mrs. Peterson hugged me tightly, tears streaming down her cheeks. You saved more than your home today. You've saved all of us from their control. Rachel smiled through her tears, whispering, Mom would be so proud of you. Dad, I looked up at the sky, where clouds parted just enough for the sun to shine through. For a moment, I felt Ellen there with us, her laughter in the breeze, her warmth in the light. Back at the warehouse, I sat in Ellen's rocking chair, Rachel beside me. The neighbors had brought flowers, food, even offers to help renovate the place. For years I'd been isolated, the man in the warehouse no one wanted around. But now I was part of something bigger. Rachel held my hand. You see, Dad? Love and truth always outlast lies and greed. I nodded, my voice breaking. I almost gave up, Rachel. But you reminded me of who I am. This warehouse, it's not just home. It's proof that no one can erase love when it's built into the very walls. We sat in silence, the sun setting in a blaze of orange and gold, painting the warehouse in colors of hope. And in that moment, I realized something I needed to share with anyone who'd listen. It doesn't matter how strong the bullies seem, how powerful the system looks. As long as you stand on truth, and as long as you have love by your side, you are never truly alone. If you've ever faced unfairness, if you've ever felt small against forces bigger than you, remember this story. Remember that justice might take time, but it does come. And if you've ever built something with your heart, don't let anyone take it from you without a fight. Because at the end of the day, our homes aren't just walls. They're where love lives. And love, my friends, can't be seized by any HOA, board, or by law.